we head back to court, let's bring in National Trial Attorney Michael Jaafar. Michael, first of all, thank you as always for joining us both here. But second of all, how do you feel like this is for defense? Basically, it's a cause of death defense, saying it's not our fault that they died. We didn't kill anybody. What do you think?
For the defense, I think it's going to be, I think the defense have a lot of options here, tons of options. I think, so, you know, Judge, actually, I'm upset that the court is not letting us watch this trial because this is the most complicated type of trial. We always talk about law school exam questions. This is the most complicated type of trial to handle, right? The most difficult for the prosecutor, difficult for the defense, because you have, you know, you have two murder victims. You're the prosecution. You have to defend. You have to prove that both of these girls who have completely different, distinct biologies and fact patterns were killed. So the defense have tons of options here. We already know from their opening statement that they're going to come in there and say, well, these girls, they were already taking their own drugs. Those are the defense attorneys for Pierce. And for Osborne, he has even more defenses. So I think this is going to be very complicated for the defense, because at the end of the day, who killed them? How were they killed, right? You can't prove that my client gave them the drugs. They were already taking ketamine. They were already taking cocaine. They already had fentanyl in their system. This was the first time that they met them. Why are you assuming that my client gave them the killing drugs? So I think they have a whole buffet of options, and I'm really upset we don't get to see this trial, because honestly, I could learn a ton by watching this trial. I've been practicing for 20 years. If I could watch this entire trial, I'd learn something every other minute. So, you know, it's kind of, you know, frustrating that we don't get to see the whole entire trial and only the openings. Even the openings, I've learned a couple of things.
And Mike, you know, you talked about how they're going to show that, in fact, he gave them the drugs that ended up killing them, or he drugged them at all. Well, I want to talk about some of the evidence the state is going to be allowed to bring in, Mike. They're bringing in 6 other victims that alleging, now he's not been convicted of these crimes, they're working their way through the system where he allegedly drugged and raped these women. They're coming forward, they're going to tell their story in this trial before we even get to the facts of this case. That's pretty devastating and prejudicial stuff. I would imagine when you do the balancing test, I guess they thought it was very probative.
I can't believe that they allowed that in. To be honest with you, I don't think it should have been in, because at the end of the day, one has nothing to do with the other, even if you take as an assumption of fact that he drugged 20 other people, right? Obviously, it doesn't look good where there's smoke, there's fire. But even if you take as an assumption of fact he drugged 20 other people, what if he didn't drug these girls, right? If there's going to be a conviction, as a citizen, I would want that conviction to be realistic. At the end of the day, these girls were not exactly blameless in their own health, because they were also taking ketamine and cocaine before they even met this villain. The prosecution is going to paint this person as a villain. Honestly, with what you just said, Michael, I don't think it's going to be hard. I think the jury is going to come into this trial with an open mind. And I think when this stuff is introduced, he will be painted as a villain. I don't think the judge should have allowed it. I honestly don't think it's relevant to this particular crime. The judge obviously disagreed with me. They looked at the evidence more closely. But at the end of the day, if you're his defense attorney, it's going to be extremely difficult to cleanse the juror's mind from that. Because I already think he's guilty. If I see that and he did this to 6 other people, then what are we even talking about? So
that's the problem.
That's what I think.
And I also think the defense is really going to go after the victims and try to do it in a way that doesn't offend the jury, but at least paints them in a bad light, because they were doing a lot of different drugs. I just wanted to mention a reminder for our viewers that California is a state in which the court has the discretion to determine whether or not cameras are allowed, and we are only allowed to bring the openings and closing in this particular case.
Yeah, we've been in this situation before with California. All right, Mike, stand by. We're going to head back to court now, where the prosecutor is still presenting her opening statement in the Hollywood Overdose Murder Trial. Let's bring back in our guest, still with us, National Trial Attorney Michael Jaafar. Michael, not to minimize all the ugly and really terrible crimes that were committed here, but as I listen to the evidence and what the state has to prove and what they say they're going to use to prove it, I'm wondering if they have enough to prove murder here. We know that both victims were taking drugs. We know that they had coke, MDMA, other drugs, ketamine in their system. They were given by this guy, according to the state, fentanyl and GHB. And they say he knew that those drugs would kill them. That, to me, is a bit of a leap. Do you think they have enough for the murder charge?
No, but this is when you, as a defendant, wish that your jury is comprised of robots and not human beings, because human beings always gravitate towards the inflammatory. And now I know why Catherine Mariano, which, by the way, the DA said, I'm going to reach deep into my bag. I want the most talented prosecutor on this, because it's going to be tough. Now I know why. This is going to be a tough case, but this is why the introduction of the other prior bad acts and the other actions, I think will do him in, because the jury of human beings will gravitate towards the inflammatory. So to answer your question, no, I don't think it's enough if the jury is comprised of robots. But if the jury is comprised of flesh and blood human beings, they're going to gravitate towards the inflammatory, and this was very inflammatory information. The remark about an Uber and being creeped out and wanting to leave. And then the pictures of the girls, because the pictures that the prosecution is going to show the jury is not of these girls taking ketamine. Is going to be pictures of them petting a kitten, and so they're going to lean into that. If you talk to any prosecutor, they'll tell you the cases that keep them up at night are not the ones they lose, it's the ones they win that they don't think they should win. I think this prosecutor truly believes that she should win this case and that this guy is a bad person, both of them. And so I think that the inflammatory information is going to do them in. But to answer your question, Michael, no. Me and you, I do not think it's enough to prove murder. It should be a high burden. I've seen people convicted with less.
But the reality is, again, the evidence she plans to present, 2005 to 2021, all kinds of victims, not of murder, but of those other druggings allegedly. But add to that, the defendant was trying to leave the country. Just quickly, Michael, that's never a good look for a defendant. That hurts them.
This is, I fully agree with you. The looking at the non-extradition treaties and all of that and having $30,000 cash, I'm telling you, this was so inflammatory. You could paint the picture. Hey, I'm a juror. I work a job. I work on the line. This guy had money. He's a producer. He's a director, and so he's trying to flee the country. I'm going to convict him. You're right, Judge. This is going to be terrible for him. Really bad opening.
Yep. All right. Unfortunately, out of time. Thank you so much, Michael Jaafar, for joining us tonight.